Tell me, Lieutenant, does that silver bullet shoot for you? Or do you actually know how to use the rifle? Commander Ryan Walker said it loud enough for the entire armory to hear, and the room went quiet in that careful military way where no one laughs first because no one knows who is about to be embarrassed. It was 5:40 in the morning at Fort Redline, a desert training base where the sun had not yet cleared the low hills and the air still held the last cool breath of night. Rows of rifles rested on steel racks beneath white fluorescent lights. Cleaning mats covered the long tables. Range cards, wind charts, and sealed ammunition boxes sat in neat stacks beside cups of black coffee that had already gone cold. Lieutenant Emily Carter stood at the center table with a Barrett 50 laid out in front of her, its components arranged with almost surgical order. She did not look like the kind of person the younger snipers expected to see assigned to an advanced long-range evaluation. She was 32, white, composed, and quietly striking, with dark blonde hair pulled into a regulation knot and gray-blue eyes that never seemed to waste movement. Her uniform was clean, but not new. On her left sleeve was a small custom patch most of the room had already noticed, a silver bullet cutting through a pair of white wings. Around her neck, half hidden beneath the collar of her undershirt, hung a slim chain carrying a tiny silver bullet casing, polished smooth from years of being touched. That was what Ryan had seen first. Not the way her hands moved over the rifle. Not the way she checked the scope mount by feel before confirming it by sight. Not the way she set each round down with the calm patience of someone who understood exactly what a mistake could cost. He saw the necklace and decided it was decoration. Emily paused for only 1 second after his question. The bolt assembly rested in her right hand. Her left thumb brushed the silver casing at her throat, not nervously, not defensively, but like a habit older than the room. Then she returned to the rifle. It was never for luck, she said. A few sailors exchanged glances. One young marksman near the ammunition locker smirked. Maybe it is there because she cannot hit with the real ones. The comment was quiet, but not quiet enough. Ryan heard it. Emily heard it. Everyone did. Ryan did not stop it, and that said more than any order could have. He was not cruel by reputation. He was disciplined, demanding, and allergic to anything he considered theatrical. He trusted paper records, clean qualifications, verified scores, and people who answered directly when asked what they had done. Emily Carter's file gave him almost nothing. Previous assignment, redacted. Distance qualification, sealed. Operational history, restricted. Awards, unavailable. To Ryan Walker, an empty record was not mystery. It was inconvenience. He stepped closer to the table and looked down at the rifle. You have a sealed file, a souvenir on your neck, and no visible long-range score I can verify. Emily slid the bolt into place with a soft metallic click. Then verify it on the range. The answer was calm, almost gentle, and that made it cut deeper. Ryan studied her face, searching for pride, fear, hesitation, anything that would tell him what kind of shooter stood in front of him. He found none of it. Only stillness. Outside, the first line of orange light touched the desert beyond Fort Redline. Inside the armory, the team waited for Ryan to respond. He nodded toward the exit. 1,200 yards. Crosswind. Low sun. You shoot last. Emily lifted the Barrett from the table with controlled ease and secured the silver bullet beneath her collar. Yes, Commander. She walked past the men who had laughed at her charm, past the racks of polished rifles, past the commander who had already judged what he did not understand. None of them knew the silver bullet was not a decoration. None of them knew it matched a round from a shot buried so deep in classified records that even Ryan Walker's clearance had never touched it. And before the morning was over, the thing he mocked would become the only detail he could not forget. The walk from the armory to the range took less than 5 minutes, but it was long enough for opinions to harden. Fort Redline opened around them in the pale light of morning, a wide stretch of desert training lanes, steel target frames, wind flags, low concrete bunkers, and observation towers rising against the orange edge of the sky. The air was dry and cool, but the heat was already waiting under the sand. By noon, the ground would shimmer. By then, mistakes would be easier to hide behind glare and wind. At dawn, everything was clean enough to be judged. Commander Ryan Walker led the group with his tablet tucked under one arm, reviewing Emily Carter's file for the 3rd time as if a missing line might suddenly appear. It did not. Her record remained a wall of gray boxes and classified notices. No verified public long-range score. No listed sniper competition history. No instructor notes attached to her transfer. Only her rank, her name, her medical clearance, and a temporary assignment order signed by an office above Ryan's normal chain. He disliked that most of all. Ryan believed that soldiers earned trust by leaving evidence of their competence where commanders could find it. Emily seemed to arrive wrapped in absence. Behind him, the younger marksmen carried equipment cases and spoke in low voices. They did not openly mock her now, but the energy followed her like dust. One sailor, Petty Officer Grant Mason, kept glancing at the silver bullet patch on her sleeve. He was 24, talented, and old enough to think talent made him wise. "That custom patch regulation approved?" he asked, pretending the question was casual. Emily kept walking with the Barrett case in her right hand. "Yes. Must have a story. Most things do." Grant waited for more. None came. Another sailor, Corporal Evan Brooks, gave a quiet snort. "That is the problem with mystery. It always wants people to do the work for it." Emily did not answer. Her silence irritated them more than anger would have. Anger gave people something to push against. Silence forced them to sit with themselves. Ryan heard the comments and let them pass, not because he enjoyed them, but because part of him wanted to see whether Emily would defend the symbol she carried. She did not. She reached the firing line, set the case down, and opened it with the same precision she had shown in the armory. The Barrett rested inside black foam, clean, heavy, and plain under the morning light. Emily removed it piece by piece, checked the chamber, confirmed the optic, and settled into the routine without looking at the men watching her. Range Officer Harold Briggs, an older civilian instructor with silver hair and weathered skin from 30 years around military shooters, stood near the spotting scope and narrowed his eyes when he saw her patch. He did not speak at first. He only watched her hands. Emily placed her data book beside the rifle, opened it to a blank page, and looked downrange. 1,200 yards away, the target board stood against a low ridge, small enough to look harmless to anyone who had never tried to reach it with precision. Wind flags flicked unevenly along the lane, left to right near the line, almost still at 500 yards. Shifting again near the target. Ryan folded his arms. "You will have one cold bore shot after the rest of the team completes the course." Emily nodded. "Understood." Grant Mason leaned near Brooks and whispered, "Hope the necklace knows the wind call." This time, Harold Briggs looked over. Not at Grant. At Emily. She had heard it. Her thumb moved once against the chain beneath her collar, then returned to the rifle. Briggs's face changed slightly, the way an old man's face changes when a memory walks in wearing a different uniform. Ryan noticed. "You know her?" he asked. Briggs kept his eyes on Emily. "No, Commander. But you know the patch." Briggs was quiet for a long second. "I know enough not to laugh at it." Ryan looked back toward Emily just as she lowered herself behind the rifle to check sight picture. Her movements were unhurried, almost too calm for someone under the eyes of an entire evaluation team. The silver bullet stayed hidden beneath her collar now, but its presence had already done its work. It had drawn out the room. It had shown who needed proof, who needed humility, and who had already seen more than he was willing to say. The first shooters took their positions as the sun cleared the ridge and turned the range gold. Ryan Walker stood behind the line with his arms folded, watching through a field scope while the team moved through the qualification course. At 1,200 yards, the target did not look like much, just a pale square set against scrub brush and hard desert earth, but distance had a way of stripping confidence down to math. Petty Officer Grant Mason fired first. His shot landed high right, respectable, but not clean. Corporal Evan Brooks followed, adjusted for wind, and clipped the edge of the scoring zone. Two more shooters took their turns with similar results. Good soldiers. Good training. Good enough for most days. Ryan marked each score on his tablet without comment. He was fair in that way. He did not praise noise, and he did not punish effort. But as the wind flags began to disagree with one another, he kept glancing toward Emily Carter. She stood a few feet behind the line, quiet, her eyes moving across the range in small measured steps. She was not watching the shooters the way the others watched them. She watched the sand, the grass near the berm, the heat beginning to bend the air halfway downrange. She watched the loose strap on a distant target frame flick once, then settle, then flick again at a different angle. Harold Briggs noticed too. The older instructor leaned over his spotting scope and said nothing, but the stillness in his face deepened. Ryan caught it. "You are seeing something," he said. Briggs did not look away from the range. "She is." Ryan followed his gaze. Emily had opened her data book again, but she was not copying numbers from anyone else. She wrote only 3 short marks, then closed it. Grant Mason stepped back from the firing line and gave her a tight smile. "Your turn soon, Lieutenant. Unless you need to ask the necklace for permission." A few men smiled because it was easier than admitting they were curious. Emily looked at him, not offended, not amused. "Permission is for people who are unsure of the target." Grant's smile faded. Ryan raised one eyebrow, but he did not interfere. He had wanted her to answer pressure. Now she had, and the answer was cleaner than he expected. Range Officer Briggs called the next sequence, and Ryan walked down the side path toward the target control shelter to inspect a sensor fault that had appeared on the tablet. It was a routine check, nothing dramatic, just one of the small mechanical problems that made training ranges feel older than their equipment. The shelter sat beyond the protected observation barrier, offset from the target rail system, and connected to the main line by a gravel service road. Ryan did not think twice about going himself. He had walked that route hundreds of times. Back at the firing point, Emily watched him move. Her expression changed by almost nothing, but her attention shifted. The rail system near the far target gave a faint metallic jerk. One of the suspended steel panels twitched on its track, stopped, then shifted again against the command sequence. Briggs saw the fault light blink on his console. "Hold the line," he called. "All shooters safe. Weapons clear." The team stepped back. The range settled into procedural silence. Ryan reached the control shelter and bent toward the panel, tablet in hand. From the firing line, the distance made him look small, just a dark shape near the pale structure. The target rail moved again, this time a few inches farther than it should have. A technician frowned at the control board. "Remote stop is not responding." Briggs's voice sharpened. "Say again." "Remote stop is not responding. Rail motor is still receiving intermittent power." The joking stopped instantly. No one panicked. They were trained better than that. But every person on the line understood that a moving steel panel on a stuck rail was not something to ignore, especially with a commander standing close to the control shelter. Emily lowered herself beside the Barrett, not behind it yet, just close enough to see through the optic. Her breathing remained even. Grant stared at her. "Range is on hold." Emily did not answer him. She looked through the scope, past the target board, past the heat shimmer, to a small emergency stop bracket mounted along the rail housing. It was no larger than a man's palm from close range. At 1,200 yards, it was almost nothing. Briggs turned toward her slowly. He knew that look. Ryan, still unaware of the full problem, tapped the side of the control box. The rail lurched again. Emily's hand moved to the silver bullet beneath her collar, touched it once, then released it. The morning had stopped being an evaluation. It had become a question only she seemed ready to answer. Emily Carter did not move fully behind the rifle until she had finished reading the range. That was the first thing Harold Briggs noticed, and it made the old instructor's jaw tighten with recognition. Most shooters saw a target and built a shot around it. Emily saw the whole field first. The wind lifting dust off the left service road, the shimmer rising from the gravel near the control shelter, the loose steel panel sliding against a rhythm that did not match the command system, and Commander Ryan Walker standing too close to a machine that no longer obeyed the people who controlled it. "All weapons clear," Briggs called again, louder this time. "Nobody fires." Emily's voice came from beside the Barrett, calm enough to make the order sound incomplete. "That rail will not stop," from the console. The technician looked over his shoulder. "Remote stop is frozen. Maintenance is moving now." "Too slow," Emily said. Grant Mason stared at her as if she had broken some sacred rule by speaking with certainty. "The range is cold, Lieutenant." Emily did not look at him. "The range is unsafe." That quiet correction changed the air around the firing line. Briggs stepped toward her, not to stop her, but to see what she saw. Through his spotting scope, the emergency stop bracket on the rail housing looked impossibly small, a dark metal tab tucked beneath the moving track assembly. It was designed for manual reset after maintenance, not for long-range intervention. A good shooter might hit the panel. A great shooter might strike the housing. But the bracket itself at 1,200 yards, through shifting wind and early heat, was the kind of target instructors mentioned only when explaining why some shots should not be attempted. Ryan's voice crackled over the range radio from near the shelter. "Control, what is the delay?" The technician answered too quickly. "Sir, please step back from the rail housing." Ryan turned, finally seeing the steel panel slide another foot along the track. It was not racing. It was worse than that. It was steady, heavy, and wrong. Emily opened the small ammunition case beside her data book. Inside were standard rounds arranged in clean rows, except for one short-marked cartridge held separately in a foam slot. Its tip had a faint silver coating, dull in the morning light. Briggs saw it and stopped breathing for a moment. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Emily lifted the round with 2 fingers. "Issued. Those have not been issued in years. Not publicly." Grant's confidence disappeared from his face. Emily loaded the single silver marker round and settled behind the rifle. Every movement slowed, not because she was uncertain, but because she was removing everything unnecessary from the moment. Her shoulders set into position. Her cheek found the stock. Her right hand relaxed, then became still. She did not ask for permission. She asked for facts. Wind at 800. Briggs looked through the scope. Right to left, 3 miles per hour, gusting 5. Target bracket angle. Quartering away. Lower edge visible. Distance confirmed. 1,200 yards. The technician whispered, "She cannot be serious." Briggs answered without looking away. "She is past serious." Downrange. Ryan stepped farther back, but the stuck rail continued to move, carrying the panel toward the control shelter's outer frame. Emily exhaled halfway and held. The world at Fort Redline seemed to narrow to 3 things: a silver marker round, a moving bracket, and the woman everyone had mistaken for a mystery instead of a professional. Her thumb brushed the chain at her collar once, not for luck, but for memory. Then she placed both hands exactly where they belonged. "Clear behind the line," she said. Briggs did not hesitate. "Line is clear." Grant Mason opened his mouth, then closed it. The rifle sounded across the desert like a single hard crack, sharp and final, followed by a silence so complete that even the wind seemed to wait. Through the scope, Briggs saw the silver marker strike the emergency bracket cleanly. The rail assembly jumped, sparked against its own stop plate, and froze. The steel panel stopped several feet short of the shelter. Ryan stood still downrange, his tablet lowered at his side, his face unreadable from the distance. On the firing line, nobody spoke. Emily lifted her cheek from the stock and cleared the rifle with steady hands. She did not celebrate. She did not look at Grant. She did not look at Ryan. She simply placed the spent casing beside her data book, silver mark facing up, and said to Briggs, "Rail is safe." The old instructor looked at the casing, then at the small silver bullet resting beneath her collar, and the memory he had been avoiding finally found its name. Ryan Walker returned from the control shelter without saying a word. The distance back to the firing line was 1,200 yards by range measurement, but for him it felt longer than that. Every step carried him past the same facts he had missed when the morning began. The rail had failed. The remote stop had frozen. The maintenance crew had been too far away to reach it in time. Emily Carter had seen the whole problem before anyone explained it, calculated a shot no one had authorized, and placed a silver marker round exactly where it needed to go. Not near enough. Not close enough. Exactly. By the time Ryan reached the firing line, the team had gathered around the spent casing on the table, but no one touched it. It sat beside Emily's data book like evidence in a courtroom. The silver mark on the casing caught the early sun, and for the first time, the tiny bullet on her chain no longer looked like a charm. It looked like a match. Grant Mason stood back from the group, arms lowered, face drained of the easy confidence he had worn all morning. Corporal Evan Brooks stared downrange at the frozen rail, then back at Emily as if trying to rebuild her in his mind from the pieces he had dismissed. Range Officer Harold Briggs remained beside the spotting scope, his expression heavy with recognition. Ryan stopped in front of Emily. She was standing now, the barrett cleared and resting safely on the mat, her hands still, her breathing even. There was no sign that she expected praise. That bothered him more than if she had demanded it. "Report," Ryan said, because command habits were easier than apology. Emily looked toward the rail. Mechanical stop bracket engaged. Panel movement halted. No personnel injury. Range should remain cold until maintenance verifies the track. Her voice was professional. No edge. No satisfaction. Ryan looked at the casing. That round. Emily did not look down. Silver marker. I know what it is. Then you know why I used it. Ryan did know, at least on the surface. Silver marker rounds were specialized, limited issue, designed for visible impact confirmation on hard training mechanisms and certain emergency field applications. They were not standard range ammunition. They were not souvenirs. They were not jewelry. Harold Briggs stepped forward before Ryan could ask the next question. Commander, he said quietly, that patch on her sleeve is not custom flare. Ryan turned. Briggs kept his voice low, but everyone close enough heard it. Silver wing mark. I saw it once in a restricted instructor packet almost 10 years ago. Only one shooter earned it. Grant Mason swallowed. Earned it how? Briggs looked at Emily, asking permission without words. Emily gave none. She also gave no objection. Briggs continued carefully. A recovery team was pinned by terrain and weather during a classified extraction exercise that went wrong. Communications were broken, visibility was poor, and the only safe way to trigger a rescue marker was from a distance most shooters would not even log as possible under those conditions. One round. Silver marker. Perfect placement. That shot opened the route that brought the team home. The range fell silent again, but this silence was different from the one in the armory. That first silence had waited for humiliation. This one made room for truth. Ryan looked at Emily's necklace. The casing on your chain. Emily's hand rose to it, fingers touching the polished silver surface with care. From that day. And your file. Sealed with the mission. Why did you not say that when I questioned you? Emily met his eyes. Because a shot that mattered does not become more real when people are told to respect it. Ryan had spent years teaching young sailors that precision was discipline, that discipline was character, that character showed under pressure. He had said those words in classrooms, on ranges, in review boards. Yet that morning, he had failed his own lesson. He had mocked a symbol before asking what it meant. He had read silence as weakness. He had taken a sealed record and called it empty. Downrange. The frozen rail clicked once as the final power bled out of the motor. Nobody flinched. The danger had passed. What remained was harder for Ryan to face. Emily picked up the spent casing and set it beside the silver bullet at her throat for one brief comparison. They matched in color, in shape, in quiet purpose. Then she placed the casing back on the table and turned toward the range. Maintenance still needs to clear the track, she said. The evaluation can continue after that. Grant Mason looked at the ground. Brooks said nothing. Briggs watched Ryan, waiting to see whether the commander would protect his pride or correct the room. Ryan understood the choice. For the first time all morning, he chose correctly. Ryan Walker turned from the spent casing to the line of shooters standing behind Emily Carter. The morning sun had climbed higher now, bright enough to sharpen every face, every rifle case, every embarrassed silence. Fort Redline had returned to procedure on paper. The rail was frozen, the range was cold, maintenance was moving, and the evaluation could wait. But the real correction had nothing to do with equipment. It stood in front of him wearing a faded silver patch and carrying the quiet patience of someone who had been underestimated too many times to be surprised by it. Ryan stepped away from the table and faced the team. Listen carefully, he said. No one shifted. Even Grant Mason lifted his eyes. I made a mistake this morning. I saw a sealed file and treated it like an empty one. I saw a symbol I did not understand and mocked it before asking what it meant. That is not leadership. That is laziness wearing rank. The words landed harder because Ryan did not soften them. Emily looked at him for a moment, then looked back downrange, giving him no rescue from the truth and no need for one. Harold Briggs remained near the spotting scope, his weathered face unreadable except for the faint approval in his eyes. Ryan turned toward Emily. Lieutenant Carter, I owe you an apology. Not privately. Not later. Here. Grant Mason's face tightened. Brooks stood straighter. The other sailors watched Emily as if waiting to see whether she would make Ryan pay for the insult. She did not. That was not her way. She touched the silver bullet at her throat once, then let it rest against her uniform. Apology accepted, Commander. Ryan nodded, but he knew those two words did not erase the morning. They only gave him a chance to do better with what came next. Maintenance vehicles rolled slowly along the service road toward the frozen rail. A technician confirmed over the radio that the system was fully powered down and safe for inspection. The team relaxed by inches, but nobody returned to joking. The range felt different now. The same target still sat 1,200 yards away. The same wind flags still moved in uneven rhythms. The same rifles waited on their mats. But everyone had learned that distance was not only measured in yards. Sometimes it was the space between what a person shows and what they have survived. Ryan picked up his tablet, opened Emily's evaluation page, and looked at the blank qualification field that had bothered him all morning. He did not fill it with assumptions. He left it empty for the right reason this time. When the range reopens, he said, Lieutenant Carter will shoot first. Grant Mason looked up quickly, but did not object. Emily turned toward Ryan. That was not the original order. The original order was based on incomplete judgment. She studied him, measuring the sincerity behind the correction. Then she gave a single nod. Briggs moved beside her and lowered his voice. You still read wind from ground shadow. Emily glanced at him. Only when the flags lie. The old instructor almost smiled. They usually do. It was the first easy moment of the morning, small but real. Ryan heard it and understood that Briggs had not simply recognized a patch. He had recognized a standard. When maintenance cleared the rail and the range reopened, Emily took her position at the line without ceremony. No one whispered this time. No one mentioned the necklace. No one questioned the silver round. She settled behind the Barrett, looked through the scope, and let the desert speak in dust, light, and wind. Ryan watched from behind the line, but he was not looking for proof anymore. He was watching a professional work. Emily exhaled, pressed the trigger, and the shot carried clean across 1,200 yards. Briggs checked the target through the spotting scope. Center. The word moved through the team like a quiet verdict. Emily cleared the rifle and stood. Ryan looked at the target, then at the silver bullet on her chain. It had never been there to impress anyone. It had been there to remind her that the only shots worth remembering were the ones that brought people home. The center shot changed the range more than the emergency stop had. The stopped rail had proven Emily Carter could act under pressure, but the clean 1,200-yard hit proved something quieter and harder to dismiss. It proved she had not been lucky. It proved the silver marker round had not been a desperate guess. It proved that the same calm everyone mistook for silence was a working system inside her, built from discipline, memory, and years of service hidden behind sealed pages. Commander Ryan Walker marked the score on his tablet, then hesitated over the comments field. There were many things he could write. Excellent shot. Corrected for crosswind. Maintained control under observation. All of them were true, and all of them felt too small. Emily stepped back from the line and gave the space to the next shooter. Grant Mason approached his rifle with a different face than before. The smirk was gone. So was the need to perform for the men beside him. He checked his chamber twice, adjusted his position, and looked toward Emily before settling behind the scope. Lieutenant, he said, the word careful, wind at the target? Emily did not make him beg for help, and she did not punish him with silence. She looked downrange. The flag is late. Watch the dust below the berm. Right to left, for miles per hour. Hold less than you think. Grant nodded. Thank you, ma'am. He fired. The shot landed inside the scoring ring, not perfect, but better than his first attempt. Briggs called the impact, and Grant released a breath that sounded more humble than relieved. The team began to work differently after that. They asked better questions. They listened longer. Brooks stopped making comments and started taking notes. The younger sailors watched Emily's hands as she adjusted the optic, then watched her eyes as she read the wind. They began to understand that her skill was not one dramatic moment. It was the small accuracy of everything she did. Ryan noticed the shift and felt both pride and discomfort. The team was improving because Emily had taught them without ever asking to teach. She had been challenged, mocked, and doubted, yet the moment the range reopened, she gave them knowledge instead of resentment. That kind of professionalism could not be ordered into a person. It had to be forged. Near midday, maintenance finished inspecting the rail system and confirmed the emergency stop bracket had done exactly what it was designed to do. The technician brought the recovered silver marker fragment back in a clear evidence pouch. He handed it to Ryan, but Ryan did not keep it. He walked to Emily and held it out. This belongs with your report. Emily looked at the pouch, then at the silver bullet on her chain. The report belongs to the range. The lesson belongs to them. Ryan followed her gaze to the team. Grant was helping Brooks with wind calls now. Briggs was correcting stance. The younger sailors had stopped staring at the necklace and started watching the shooter. Ryan lowered the pouch. You could have left us to learn the hard way. Emily's expression remained calm. They are still young enough to learn the right way. And me? He asked. For the first time that morning, there was the faintest warmth in her eyes. That depends on what you do after being wrong. The answer stayed with him because it was not forgiveness dressed up as comfort. It was a standard. Ryan looked across the desert range, at the target 1,200 yards away, at the frozen rail now safe and silent, at the team learning to listen. He understood that the silver bullet had never been the story by itself. It was a reminder that precision meant nothing without purpose, and authority meant nothing without humility. When Emily returned to the line to coach the next shooter, no one questioned why she stood there. They made room before she arrived. By early afternoon, the range had settled into a rhythm that no longer belonged to Ryan Walker alone. The sun was high over Fort Redline, bright enough to bleach the desert hills pale gold, and the heat shimmer made the 1,200-yard target appear to breathe. The younger shooters had stopped trying to impress one another. They moved slower now, asked quieter questions, and waited for answers before touching their rifles. Emily Carter stood near the firing line with her sleeves down, her silver wing patch visible whenever the light caught her arm. The tiny silver bullet on her chain rested beneath her collar again, hidden from view, but nobody needed to see it anymore. Its meaning had already changed the way they stood around her. Harold Briggs watched from behind the spotting scope, looking more satisfied than he wanted anyone to notice. Grant Mason had improved his second and third shots after listening to her wind correction. Evan Brooks had stopped blaming the glare and started recording actual conditions in his data book. Even the maintenance crew, finished with the rail inspection, lingered near the service road as if they understood they had witnessed more than a range malfunction. Ryan stood beside the evaluation table, reviewing the scores, but his attention kept returning to Emily. She had every opportunity to remind the team of their earlier disrespect. She took none of them. She corrected posture. She explained mirage drift. She showed one sailor how to breathe through the final second before trigger press without rushing the shot. Her voice remained even. Her patience never turned soft. It was the kind of teaching that gave no comfort to excuses, but left room for growth. That was when Briggs stepped closer to Ryan. You know what makes her rare? He asked. Ryan looked at Emily. The shot. Briggs shook his head. The restraint. Ryan did not answer. Briggs continued, his voice low enough that only the commander could hear. A lot of people can hit a target after years of training. Not many can be mocked in the morning, save the room before noon, and still teach the same people by lunch. Ryan absorbed that because it was true. His apology had been necessary, but Emily's response had revealed something deeper than skill. She had not come to Fort Redline to win an argument. She had come to raise a standard. A radio call from the operations building broke across the range channel. Commander Walker, Base Command requests final status on the rail incident and personnel evaluation. Ryan reached for the microphone, then paused. He looked toward Emily, who was helping Grant adjust his notebook instead of watching him. That detail made his decision easy. Base Command, this is Walker. Rail incident contained. No injuries. Evaluation continuing. Add to preliminary report that Lieutenant Carter identified the hazard, stopped the malfunction, restored range safety, and then improved team performance through direct instruction. There was a short silence on the radio. Copy that, Commander. Confirm you want that language included in the formal record. Ryan looked at the silver patch on Emily's sleeve. Confirmed. Emily heard him. She did not turn around, but her hand stilled for 1 second on the edge of Grant's data book. It was the only sign that the words had reached her. Ryan understood, then, that respect did not have to be loud to matter. Sometimes it was simply the truth being placed where silence had been forced to stand for too long. Grant looked up at Emily. Ma'am, why keep the casing on a chain if you do not want people to ask about it? Emily considered the question. The team quieted without being told. She touched the hidden silver bullet through the fabric of her collar. Because I do want to remember, she said. I just do not owe every stranger the story. No one challenged that. No one smiled. The desert wind moved across the firing line, lifting dust around their boots. Ryan looked at the young shooters and saw the lesson settle into them. The silver bullet was not a lucky charm, not decoration, not an invitation to judge. It was proof that some memories are carried privately, and some respect is earned the moment people stop demanding a person explain the weight they already bear. The final score was posted at 1,530 hours, when the desert light had begun to soften and the long shadows from the observation towers stretched across the range. Fort Redline looked ordinary again from a distance. Target frames, gravel roads, rifle cases, wind flags, and a team of tired shooters packing equipment after a long evaluation day. But no one who stood on that line believed the day had been ordinary. Grant Mason carried his data book differently now, as if the pages inside mattered more than his pride. Evan Brooks helped secure the range mats without being asked. Harold Briggs logged the rail malfunction with careful language, leaving no room for anyone to turn Emily Carter's shot into rumor or exaggeration. Commander Ryan Walker signed the incident report last. He read the formal line twice before submitting it. Lieutenant Carter identified unsafe mechanical movement, used authorized emergency range procedure, restored safe conditions, and provided follow-on marksmanship instruction. It sounded plain. It sounded official. It sounded much smaller than what had happened. Ryan looked up from the tablet and found Emily near the armory truck, placing the Barrett back into its case. The silver bullet on her chain had slipped free of her collar again, catching the late sun for a brief second before resting against her uniform. Earlier that morning, he had seen that same object and mistaken it for vanity, superstition, or decoration. Now it looked like a quiet record of a promise kept. He walked over without his tablet, without a command tone, without the armor of procedure. "Lieutenant Carter," he said. She closed the rifle case and faced him. "Commander." Ryan glanced toward the team, who were close enough to see but far enough to give the moment room. "I have spent a lot of years telling shooters that assumptions get people into trouble. Most lessons come back around," Emily said. There was no cruelty in it. That made it harder to avoid. Ryan nodded. "This one did." He paused, choosing the words carefully because easy words would have insulted the day. "I mocked something you carried because I did not understand it. Then I watched it match the round that kept this range safe and reminded my team what discipline actually looks like. I will not make that mistake again." Emily looked at him for a long moment. The wind moved softly across the empty firing line. "Do not make it with someone quieter than me," she said. Ryan accepted that like an order. Behind them, Grant approached with his cap in his hands. His voice was steady, but stripped of the confidence he had worn in the armory. "Ma'am, I was wrong too." Emily turned to him. "Yes." He swallowed. "Thank you for correcting me without humiliating me." Emily's expression softened by the smallest degree. Humiliation does not make better shooters. Attention does. Grant nodded. "I will remember that." Then the day was useful. Briggs closed the range log and walked past Ryan, stopping only long enough to look at Emily's silver wing patch. "Still center when it counts," he said. Emily gave him the faintest smile. "Only when the flags lie." The old instructor chuckled once and kept walking. Ryan watched the team load the final cases, quieter and more careful than they had been at sunrise. The change was not dramatic. It was better than dramatic. It was real. Emily lifted her gear and started toward the armory, moving with the same calm she had carried before anyone respected her. The difference was in the way people made space now. Not out of fear, not because of rank, because they had seen competence answer insult with control and skill answer doubt with purpose. As the sun dropped behind Fort Redline's low hills, the silver bullet on her chain disappeared beneath her collar again. It did not need to shine anymore. Everyone there knew what it meant. Some symbols are not worn to impress a room. They are carried to remember the moment a single disciplined choice brought someone home, and the people who learn that truth never look at silence or a soldier the same way again.